Welcome to the Scalable Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we discuss the most scalable strategies, tools, and approaches to successfully invest in real estate. Learn how to make the most impact of your time, automate your real estate investing business, find off-market deals with minimum time invested, and leverage your capital to create as many income streams as possible so that you can achieve true financial independence. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Mason Clement. Hi, Scalable Investors. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Scalable Real Estate Investing. I'm your host, Mason Clement, and today we have with us Paul Moore of Wellings Capital. Really excited to have Paul back on the show with us. He was actually on episode 10. If you want to skip over to that when you have another second. In that episode, we talked about his experience investing in self-storage, and today we're going to dig into something slightly different. Delaware Statutory Trust. And you might have heard the term thrown around a little bit here and there, but I think Paul is one of the experts that could definitely speak on the subject a lot. So we're going to jump into that right now.
Hey, so this is great. You know, here's what happened. A couple years ago, somebody came to me, and you know, our average investor, Mason, in Wellings Capital's funds is 75,000. We have a bunch at 50, then we have some at 100, 200, 300, even up to 600. But we had a guy call us who we knew, and he said, "Hey, I got $2.1 million. I want to invest now." And I was like, wow, that's okay. That's a lot. You know, you sure you want to put all that in one place? He said, "Yeah, because I'm doing a 1031 exchange." Now, Mason, do you think your audience knows what a 1031 exchange is, or should we talk about that a little?
It depends on the listener, but we can dig into a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get back to that in a minute. Okay. So basically I said, well, sir, I can't really help you because you can't do a 1031 exchange from a active asset into a passively managed LLC with other investors. It's just not possible. And I looked into a little, I found out there was a way to do it through a tenant in common arrangement. But anyway, it wasn't something that made sense for him. And he, as I'll explain later, he said, "I am committed to this 1031 exchange because it's a way to kick your capital gains tax and other taxes down the road and not pay taxes until you die. And even when you die, if that property is still in the name of the person when they pass away, the kids don't ever have to pay tax with certain limitations. Up to like 10 or $20 million in property, that tax bill is gone. It's wiped out at the time they pass away. So 1031 exchange is very powerful. It's a way to swap properties one for the other and avoid capital gains tax, but also depreciation recapture taxes, which we could get into later if you want. He called me back a month later and he said, "I'm so happy. I figured out how to do it. I'm going from actively managed real estate to this passive thing. Someone else is doing it for me. The returns aren't so great," but he was so happy. And it was called a Delaware Statutory Trust. And now he's getting, I think it's like $100,000 a year income from that $2.1 million investment. And it's not the greatest income in the world. It's like 5% a year, but it's safe, it's stable, it's predictable. He gets tax benefits inside the DST. And the big thing is he doesn't ever have to pay the capital gains on that 2.1 million. He's in his 70s and he's figuring if he can keep this going till he passes away, his wife and or kids will be real happy that he did. So that's how I heard about Delaware Statutory Trusts. Now, a 1031 exchange, to dial in a little more, is a way to swap one property for another. You swap the property through an intermediary. You don't actually have to swap A for B directly. That's how it was originally set up in the 1930s. But you basically go through an intermediary. You take the proceeds from property A, put it in the hands of this third party. Then when you find property B, they pay for the property and you close on the property. The problem is the IRS got really mad about these things and they went after this guy named Starker in like the 80s. And they spent years and years and years fighting this guy for doing these 1031 exchanges. And they made a bunch of rules that came out of that. Starker won, but they made a bunch of rules and they say, now you have to identify 3 properties you might exchange for within 45 days of closing. You have to close on the new properties within 6 months of closing. And you have to follow some other rules that aren't that hard, but they're not always obvious to people who really, just don't know what they're doing. So the great news is that when people use this 1031 exchange, they have the capital gains and all that stuff right off, but these restrictions make it almost impossible in this environment to get a good deal. I mean, you've got overpriced real estate everywhere now. You got people competing with each other to pay for the overpriced real estate, Mason. And so it's really, really hard to get a good deal. And even if you name 3 properties in 45 days, chances are somebody will snatch them up, or you'll find something in due diligence, because of COVID, you can't get there in a timely way. It is a nightmare to find a 1031 exchange. Well, the great news is a Delaware Statutory Trust exists to fix this problem. People with a 1031 exchange that are exchanging out of, let's say it's a 4-plex apartment that they're selling in San Francisco or New York for, say, $1 million or $2 or $3 million. I know it sounds crazy, but if they want to exchange that money, let's say it's $1 million, and they don't want to pay the profit on it, the capital gains on the profit, they're exchanging that now into a fully managed asset. Somebody else manages it. Somebody else does all the accounting. Somebody else goes and gets the debt in their name. And all they have to do is get a check in the mail every month. The returns usually in a DST are not as high as others because there's no value add. It's just a stable property. But this is an opportunity. If you have a 1031 exchange, you may want to look at this, especially if you don't want to stay in the fray managing properties on your own. So that's a quick overview, Mason.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So besides, I don't know, stumbling across someone's marketing of a Delaware Statutory Trust, how would you really find one to invest in? And would there be someone kind of holding your hand through that process if it's your first time doing it? How would that work?
So the cool thing is about Delaware Statutory Trusts, unlike, they're pretty regulated in general. They've got a lot of rules around them. And almost every DST, all but one that I've stumbled across, are sold through broker dealers. And these broker dealers have tons of rules of what they can say, what they can't say, what they disclose. And hopefully they're giving you a true picture of the DST, the underlying asset, how to save on taxes, etc. And so the way to find those is to go to a place like K Properties, that's KAY, or realized1031.com. And they have a wide array of opportunities to buy into DSTs. I did mention that there's one exception to that. We challenged this about 8 months ago when we decided to do this. We challenged the fact that you have to run through a broker dealer. And we talked to 3 attorneys. And we said, is there anything in the law that says you have to run through a broker dealer? And they said no. And we said, well, we're going to do it ourselves. And so we set up our own DST, and investors who invest with us don't have to pay the broker dealer commission, and they can talk straight to us as the managers of this property. But that's the exception. In general, you're going to want to go through a broker dealer.
Okay, so you don't have to get like a Series 79 or some other type of FINRA regulation.
No, we don't. We don't have to follow those regulations. It's just like, what's another example? It's just like selling your home for sale by owner. There's no rule that says you have to use a real estate agent. I think there's a lot of advantages to using an agent, but you can do for sale by owner. And that's basically what we're doing with this investment. So some of the downsides to a DST, they include this high broker dealer fee, like 6 to 9% sometimes. They also include the fact that typically the 1%, there's because the value add is not there. These are super stabilized properties. A lot of them are triple net leases, Mason. So if you do a lease on a Walgreens store, that would be a potential DST. It might have a 30-year lease on that store. 20-year lease is more common. And the DST owns the building and leases it to Walgreens. And they might only make 4.5 or 5 or 6% a year, but it's stable, it's predictable, and it's going to be around. It's not going to go up and down like, some properties have, these huge vacancies or whatever. It's a single tenant. In fact, all DSTs are ultimately a single tenant. Ours is a self-storage facility with 607 units, but all those individual tenants pay one LLC, and that LLC leases the facility from the DST. And so there's one payment every month. It's completely stable. Now, if we have massive vacancy at that self-storage facility, it's going to affect the revenues. But other than that, we expect it to be quite stable for a long time to come.
Okay, so that 607 unit facility, would that be something that you had previously bought and stabilized, and then you're maybe rolling over into a DST, or is it just a brand new property for your portfolio?
Wow, great question. So that's another thing we don't like about DSTs, and that is they have to work perfectly. I mean, a Walgreens store, 20-year lease, easy to evaluate. There it is. Amazon sorting facility. My acquaintance does that up in New Hampshire. Easy to evaluate. Amazon's going to be around. I mean, if they're not around, we've got much bigger problems than just a DST going bad. But anyway, it's easy to evaluate. But in general, as a small player, I didn't know how to be 100% or as sure as I could be that this property was going to perform as advertised. What if we got in there? Okay, so I have a friend who bought a storage facility in Florida, and like 60 of the tenants were actually friends and family of the owner, the seller, and they were cooking the books. They just leased them. They put their names on them to fill it up, to look better when they sold. And when this guy bought, I actually was an investor in this project. Those 40 or 50 or 60 people, of course, left the next month. That left a huge hole. I didn't want anything like that to happen to our DST. So when we did this, we actually took a property that was already in our portfolio that we already knew really well. We'd improved the value on it. We went out and got two completely independent appraisals on it, and we sold it from the portfolio into the DST. And by doing that, we had the same marketing, same property manager, same website, same tenants, all predictable. And so far in 4 months, it's going just as planned. We plan to hold this asset for 10 years, by the way.
Okay, so as the sponsor, what's the benefit for you to do that?
You may be surprised. It's less than you would think. And you're thinking, come on, Paul, you didn't go through all that effort to make a little bit of money. There's so it was a $4.6 million acquisition. So we got an acquisition fee on the front end of, let's say it was $40,000, let's say 1%, it might've been 2%. So let's say $80,000. Not enough to make this work that well. All the appreciation and all the income, the 6% a year, goes straight to the investor. So you're like, wait, if you don't get to share in the income or the appreciation at the back end, by the way, it's 6% income, and then we're predicting 4 to 6% a year appreciation at the end. Every bit of that goes to the investor. We get a 1% liquidation fee at the end. That's, let's say we sell it for $6 million. That's $60,000. That's not a whole lot. We also get the property management fees as we go, but that's not that profitable because it takes a lot of effort. We might make 1 or 2% a year from that. And then if we perform better than the 6% a year that we give to investors, we get to keep that. That's called scrape. Don't ask me why it's called scrape, but Mason, we get to keep that as well. So overall, it's not that large. And so when we were evaluating this, we thought, why do companies do these? Why does a company like Inland have $1 billion in DSTs? Why do these companies do it? Then we realized it. The reason they do it is we were doing a $4 million deal. A typical DST is 20, 40, 100, or even $200 million. Now, if you take those same percentages I just fired at you and multiply that times a property that's 100 times bigger, instead of 4 million, let's say 400 million, and there are DSTs, they're probably not 400 million, but let's say you got 4 of them in a year that were 100 million each. Now you're talking some real money. The effort involved in a $4 million one and a $40 million one wouldn't be that much different. If we made 10 times as much, that would be some real money for us. It'd be good for investors. And so if we ever decide to ramp up to a $40 million deal, then basically this was practiced for that day. It's like buying a single family or duplex to get ready to go out and buy a 100-unit apartment building.
Okay. Yeah, it's really interesting. It kind of reminds me of ETFs. Like, how do they make money? The fees are so low, but it's like billions of dollars.
Yes, that's exactly right. I love that analogy, Mason. I'm using that from now on.
Perfect. Go ahead. I have not copywritten it or anything. So.
All right.
So when each DST deal occurs, could it be multiple properties, or is it always a 1-for-1 ratio?
It's
property,
almost always one property, but I have heard that there are DSTs with a few properties in them, but they always are in the same asset. Like, let's say 2 self-storage facilities in Atlanta, for example.
Okay, got it. And then the organizer that's serving as the trustee, is that also you, the sponsor, the operator, all the same?
Yeah, it's all the same. And I mean, in our case, it's us and our operating partner. Our operating partner is doing the bulk of this, and we're kind of like we're the bolt-on partner with him.
Okay, got it. So you helping to raise the capital side of it, and then maybe he's continuing to operate it, or
yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So I guess at the end of the day, say maybe would it be beneficial if I was maybe passively invested in a deal, and then that deal goes full cycle, the asset's sold, and I get a big lump sum of money? I probably have to pay capital gains on that, right? Unless I put it into something, and probably makes sense to roll that into another passive DST. Is that where this would really come into play?
Yeah. So a lot of people who are just like my friend, who is tired of managing the property himself, said, hey, you know what? We really need to, I really want to get out of this management game. So he wants to roll in, but at the end of his 10 years, let's say it was 10 years in the one he's doing, he is in I can't remember what it is that he invested in. I think it's in a large apartment building. But at any rate, he'll likely roll it over through another DST, do another 1031 out into a second one. And I hope the 1031 exchange laws are still in place in 10 years. They've been here for about 90 years so far. So hopefully the new administration won't mess with success.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that if you're completely ignorant of DSTs existing, and you're just trying to do a typical 1031 exchange, it can sometimes make you desperate and maybe not buy at the best price and stuff like that. So
yeah,
it seems like a better solution, because of those 3 potential investments you're presenting within that 45 days, you can just say, I have this DST here, and you don't have to really worry about anything else because the deal's already locked down, right?
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. Yeah, the crazy thing about DSTs is we buy the deal and we set it up, and then the investors come in. So you have to have some cash to do a deal like this, because you've got to basically, the investors are replacing the cash you put in at closing. It's the opposite of how other closings work.
Oh, okay. That is interesting. And then, like, say that this 607 unit storage facility is sold after 10 years, whatever, it goes full cycle. Would I then, as an investor in that DST, need to pay taxes on that, or look for the next DST?
Yeah, you would either cash out and pay taxes, or you'd be looking for another 1031 exchange. Maybe maybe at the end of 10 years, you're in the mood to manage a property yourself again, or maybe you know about a phenomenal deal you want to get into that just happens to be the perfect timing. You only have 45 days to name that deal and 6 months to close, but yeah, you're going to need to keep that they call it kicking the can down the road and swapping till you drop. So that's the goal with most of these DSTs. So yeah, we believe almost all of our investors will do another DST at the end of this one, assuming the laws haven't changed.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering to what extent you could offset some of those gains. Say in the first DST, you roll over into the second one. How much of that's being shielded by depreciation as you're holding it in the DST?
It's amazing. Bonus depreciation can actually mean that let's say the 6% income per year, that's what ours is throwing off. Bonus depreciation means you actually might not even pay taxes on that, the income, for years to come, which is powerful. It's an opportunity to actually avoid taxes. And like you said, if you continue to swap and swap and swap till you drop, you actually might never have a tax bill on that depreciation recapture or the capital gains. It is really amazing. The deal we did on self-storage, it just happened that self-storage property, Mason, is actually modular construction, which means it had 100% bonus depreciation against the equity value in year one. It's actually above 100. And that means if somebody invests 50,000 with us, they're actually getting like a $60,000 tax write-off year one. And if they can't use it in year one, which they almost never can, then that's carried forward for years to come to cover the income that our property throws off. It's a pretty cool deal.
Okay. Is that the depreciation recapture that you mentioned earlier?
It's actually bonus depreciation. It came into effect under the December 2017 tax law. And that tax law allows you to take like 15 years of depreciation and compress them all into the year of acquisition. We believe the new administration might take that away, but we have it for now.
Okay. Yeah, the first 100 days are coming up. We'll see what damage Biden does. We'll see.
Yeah, it's going to be some.
Okay. So say I didn't really have to do a 1031 exchange. Would a DST be a wise investment, or would that just be maybe too low of a return? It just doesn't make sense starting out.
There's several reasons it's a great investment anyway. So number one, we had a lot of our investors who didn't have a 1031 exchange, and they just said, look, I'm looking for a stable, predictable asset that's just going to throw off, in our case, 6% a year. And there's no drama involved. And so that was something that quite a few of our investors came through that route. When they heard the bonus depreciation was going to be so high, it made them even happier to come in. Now, that was only in the year of acquisition. And as we're recording this, that year has just passed. That was the end of 2020. And so but if I do a new one in 2021, yeah, that'll work that way as long as the bonus depreciation is kept intact.
Okay. Very interesting. I want to change gears a little bit and back up to how you find these deals and how you source them. Because I remember a previous discussion, I think you mentioned one investor that you know, he has like 4 different people calling every day, different self-storage owners. Or how is your approach? Do you use that approach, or what is your typical approach?
Yeah, I mean, we partner with that operator, and by partnering with that operator, we're actually getting the advantage. It's now 5. He's expanded. He's got 5 people working the phones 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, calling through thousands of mobile home park and self-storage operators a week. I think they can cover 2,000 a week. And by doing that continually, they're basically calling every owner on their list 3 or 4 times a year. And so when that owner decides to sell through a health crisis or death in the family or just time to sell, hopefully my friend's team is going to be top of mind. And that happens all the time. It's the most powerful strategy I know to find deals.
Okay. So really starting with a cold call and then building that relationship and following up. Say, hey, I know you're not interested in selling, but checking in. It's a quarterly checkup, something like that.
Yeah, here's a story. Not an 88-year-old guy in Michigan with a huge mobile home park. My friend's team called him 8 years ago at 88 years old And they called him 4 times a year on average for 7 years, when he was 88, 89, 90, all the way till he was 95. Well, when he was 95, their phone rang, and it was his niece. And they said, he's 95 now. The family had a meeting with him and we finally talked him into selling. Is that offer, that verbal offer you made a couple years ago, still good? And my friend said, well, yeah, but no, I mean, that's not enough. I mean, and then she said, yeah, that's enough. That's enough. That's millions of dollars. He doesn't need any more than that. We'll go ahead and sign that contract as soon as you get it over. And so my friend was on an airplane the next morning to Michigan, met with the family in person, closed the deal, and that turned into a wonderful cash flowing mobile home park that we share in at Wellings Capital. We invest with him. And so all of our hundreds of investors have a stake in that mobile home park. He did the hard work. We all get the benefit.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely exciting. You have to really flex that patience muscle, I guess, or have the 5 callers do that.
That's really true.
Yeah. All right. So before we started recording, you mentioned you just have 50,000 remaining to raise for this DST.
Yeah, so this Delaware Statutory Trust has 50,000 left. So if somebody's doing a 1031 exchange, or if they just want a stable cash flowing asset, if it's still available when this recording goes live, you can definitely reach out to me at wellingscapital.com.
All right, perfect. Yeah, I'll be sure to also include that in the show notes. I think we've hit on all the major points of DSTs and everything. Hopefully this was enlightening. Do you feel like we missed anything though, Paul?
Yeah, I think that people get really caught up with the broker fee. My friend who did 2.1 million said the fee was 6%. And it really irritated him because that was like $125,000, 120 something $1,000. And he really thought that that was egregious. He said, look, if I was investing 100,000, it would have been the same work for the guy. And so he went back and negotiated that fee down. He got it cut in half. So that's my advice. And that is, don't get too caught up in the fee. Get caught up more in the sponsor, the stability of the deal, the likelihood it will survive an economic shock. And then second, see if you can negotiate the fees on the front end. But even if you can't, DSTs are a great way to go if it's a shoe that fits your situation.
All right. Well, that's definitely very helpful. Going to keep that in mind. Thanks for sharing that story.
You bet, Mason. Man, it was great to be here again, and I'm really honored that you chose to have me on the show again.
Well, I'm glad you took the time, so thanks a lot.
All right, thanks.
Sure. All right, Scalable Investors, that's the end of our episode. If you're interested in connecting more to see how we might be able to work together or to be considered for your own episode on this podcast, please email me at mason@scalablerealestateinvesting.com. That's MASON at scalablerealestateinvesting.com. Also, please be sure to leave a review and subscribe on whatever channel you're listening or watching these episodes on. And also feel free to sign up for our email list at scalablerealestateinvesting.com. Scroll to the bottom and fill out the form there. Thanks a lot. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode.